I make no apology for what I'm about to tell you about ISIS, about how they rape and torture women and many children, many as young as 8, how they bury children alive, crucify them, use them as suicide bombers, how they hack men's heads off, how they burn them in cages, all in the name of religion. Yet Max Hill QC, the independent reviewer of our terror laws, reckons jihadis returning to Britain shouldn't be prosecuted because some are, quote, naive, disillusioned teenagers. No, they're not. They're heartless killers who made a commitment to murder, maim and destroy the West. If we must take them back, we should confiscate their passports and prosecute them as the terrorists they are. The Sofan Centre, which studies security around the world, says returnees, 5,600 from 33 countries, will present a global threat for decades to come. The only naive people here are those who think you can rehabilitate murderers prepared to die for their twisted Islamist ideology. I don't actually care what happens to them. I just don't want them here on our streets, poisoning young minds and killing our kids.
Carole, well, I was really hoping that this wouldn't be a debate about whether ISIS is bad or not, because I think we all agree that they are despicable and that the crimes that they've been carrying out are horrific. And I can't imagine anyone would disagree with that. But it's all right for you to say you don't care what happens to the people who join. But unfortunately, there are people in this country whose job it is to care what happens to them. We have to deal with the people who are coming back. So the number that I've got here is about 800.
Why do we have to deal with them? Why are we letting them come back in the first place?
Because they're British citizens. And some of them are coming back.
British citizens who left this country to kill children, to murder and maim. And why are we letting them back? They don't deserve to come back.
So you think we should outsource our responsibility and let someone else deal with the problem?
I don't care what happens to them, like I said in the intro. I don't care what happens to them. I just don't want them back here because they're killers. They have no mercy. You know, ISIS, their savagery knows no bounds. They're inhuman. What they have done to people and to children is inhuman.
Like I said, we all agree about that.
So fine. So why do you want them in this country? Why do you want them on our streets? Because they get sent to prison when they come back for piddling amounts of time, and then they're released back onto the streets. Do you really think that a little de-radicalisation programme in prison, which is not compulsory, by the way, they can take it or not, do you really think that's going to sort them out and they're going to be good citizens and go work in Tesco's or serve burgers? They're not.
I don't think what you're saying is realistic or constructive. I think we would all like for people not to have left Britain to join in the first place, and we would like it even more if ISIS didn't exist.
So all the experts
and weren't committing the horrific acts. But this isn't a constructive conversation. The reality is people are coming back. Some are coming back actually using their British passports, and it's not being detected that they went off to join ISIS till they're here. So once they're here, there is nothing you can do. Now, the quote that you're using from Max Hill, the independent reviewer of terrorism, I find it misleading, I have to say, because what he's saying is we have a criminal justice system in this country that reviews people, and when they've been involved in terrorism, reviews them very, very carefully. And the reason why some of them are not being prosecuted is because they couldn't make a case. So the organisations reviewing them will be our intelligence services. They'll be like the intelligence service that Andrew Parker said last week had never been under a bigger threat than they are now. And you talk about this guy Hill. His predecessor, a guy called David Anderson, said that returning jihadis were the single biggest threat to this country and would remain so for decades to come. Well, I'd like other people to come in, but I think there's a lot of confusion in what you're saying, because the threat...
There's no confusion in what I'm saying.
No, there is, because the domestic threat to terrorism is not necessarily coming from people who have been fighting abroad. And the former director of counter-terrorism for MI5 has said, actually, the bigger threat to domestic terrorism in the UK is not...
You never want to focus on Islamic terrorism, on Islamist terrorism. You never want to focus on it. I can't even have
this conversation with you because you're not engaging with the issue, Carole.
I am. I'm absolutely engaging with the issue.
Let's just hear what the current MI5 Director General, Andrew Parker, had to say about this.
We're now running well over 500 live operations involving around 3,000 individuals known to be currently involved in extremist activity in some way. As well as those we're looking at today, risk can also come from returnees from Syria and Iraq, and also the growing pool of over 20,000 individuals that we've looked at in the past in our terrorism investigations.
Now, pretty unprecedented that a Director General in that position would even give a speech, and the numbers that he shared, wholly unprecedented. Where I think you're both right. Of course, no one is going to defend what ISIS did. Absolutely. So let's park that. We all agree it is a barbarous, medieval death cult who needs to be defeated. And I agree with you, by the way, the fact that they're going to wander in and they're deemed to possibly be naive is wrong either. So I ask, what happened in 2014 then Prime Minister David Cameron brought in something called TEOs, Temporary Exclusion Orders, which were designed to deal with this. And if I have run off from Blackburn or Luton or Stevenage or whatever and I've gone to fight twice, I'm actually stopped at the border and then I'm taken into detention for a maximum period of 2 years while they assess whether I could pose a threat. Now, this was one of, to quote Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, this is one of the parts of the toolbox to defeat terrorism. Why, when these people are arriving, why are they not being given TEOs, temporary exclusion orders? I don't mean throw them in a detention camp, put them in a perfectly reasonable centre, work with them and assess the level of threat that they pose. And then lastly, another former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, diluted the Treason Act to a point where it is absolutely worse. The guts have been kicked out of it. I think there's an argument that we calmly and soberly, we look at the current treason legislation. And now I would have to effectively try and murder the Queen or Prince Philip to have any chance of being done for treason. We reassess that. If you've chosen to go and fight against a clear enemy like ISIS, we look at a possible prosecution under a new Treason Act. That's where I would go.
You say we've got to assess the threat they pose. We know the threat they pose.
Some of them will be real low level.
They massacred, raped and beheaded their way across 2 countries.
Carole, what makes you think you understand the threat that individuals
What makes you
pose
understand?
better
What makes you think you understand about the head of MI5?
Terrorism at MI5 than the former.
Well, the head of
Director
MI5 just said they're a huge danger.
If you listen to someone like Keir Starmer, who was Director of Public Prosecution...
I'm going to listen to Keir Starmer instead of the head of MI5.
Who was the Director of Public Prosecution, he will tell you that nothing in our current legal system is preventing them from processing people who pose a threat. We're not using exclusion orders anymore, but we are using...
Did you see the story today that said that the prosecution service, the CPS, don't have enough prosecutors to prosecute terrorists? They said that today.
As we know, we talk about it almost every week, our criminal justice system is...
Did you hear that?
They
don't have enough people to prosecute the terrorists that are coming back here.
If you are saying that we need to increase resources so that we process people properly, so that we remain safe,
I'm saying we should prosecute them. Why are we just assessing them? They went to murder and kill. They knew what ISIS was about before. Are you actually saying they didn't know what they were joining? Seriously?
Did you hear me say that?
You shocked your head when I said they knew.
Did anybody hear me say that?
Well, you're always just rolling around, so I never know quite what you're doing. Anyway.
The description of these people being naive, I think, is completely wrong. I don't think these people are naive at all. I think that they go with full information about what they're going to find when they get there. At least they think that's what they have. So they go with a real intention. I think what maybe happens when they get there is they realise actually just how bad the situation is and they can't hack it. Or they're coming back because actually they're so energised by what they're hearing, they want to come home and actually do something about it on British soil instead. So I completely dispute the label that these people are naive. I don't think that they are at all.
I think Carole has a point, though. They can't be allowed to use their rights as British citizens to come back boo-hooing to mummy after having had the intention to go off and throw gays off tall buildings and rape and pillage all their way around the Middle East.
And actually, on that note, it might be a moment, just sorry to interrupt you, just to show we've got a quick clip of somebody who did go to fight explaining why he did want to come back.
At the end of the day, I'm just trying to get my life back. If it so be it that I have to go to prison in order to do that, and I'm prepared to do that. Like I said, I'm not here to harm anybody. I'm just here to look after my family and live my life.
So how many lives did he take, I wonder? He wants his life back. How many lives did he take?
But Rory Stewart, the MP, who's actually spent an enormous amount of time in Afghanistan and Pakistan and has lived with these people, says that the most sensible thing to do is, I gasped when I heard this, was actually shoot them on the battlefield to kill them before they return. He said it's basically the only way you can deal with it, especially given the extreme form of radicalisation.
You're right.
Well, can we just see what Rory Stewart MP said? He said, they believe in an extremely hateful doctrine which involves killing themselves, killing others and trying to use violence and brutality to create an 8th century or 7th century state. We have to be serious about the fact these people are a serious danger to us, and unfortunately the only way of dealing with them will be, in almost every case, to kill them. Yes. So, that's quite radical, isn't it, Carole?
Radical, but the thing is, we don't have the time or the resources to make these people into decent human beings.
It's also probably not legal. It's also probably not illegal. Course of action.
He did clarify his comments to say that he wasn't advocating anything that's not in line with the law. And
he means in war, kill them in war, not line them up.
Sorry, Michelle, I didn't mean to cut you off. But all I want to say is that we fought and worked very hard over centuries to build the society we have today.
Yeah.
this is a complicated situation. I've spoken to people who've come back from Syria. There are a number of ways people end up there. Some of them go to help with humanitarian causes and end up with ISIS. Some of them go to kill people. Yes. There is a range of factors. Now, we have a system that is sophisticated enough to take people on their individual case and deal with them accordingly. And when you talk about just throwing the whole thing away and shooting them all, for example, that worries me,
don't
Carole.
have the resources. They're watching 30,000 closely now, and you want another 450 to be looked at as well. We don't have the money to make them into decent
Carole,
people
is
again.
the world a safer place if they are penned in the Middle East, or if they come back and are treated in this triage system?
But truthfully, I don't believe you can treat them. I think when they've been radicalised to that extent, I don't believe there's a way back. They're members of a caliphate that want to destroy the West, and I very much doubt.
Do you just bolt the door, Carole?
On them,
but where do they go?
Well, I don't care. Seriously, Nick, I don't care.
It's like out of sight, out of mind, but it doesn't mean they're not going to do what they do anyway.
But the thing
whether
is,
they do it there or here.
Yeah, that's true.
Michelle's been waiting.
I wait patiently.
Sorry,
I'm not
sorry,
you going to let me speak.
You go.
So my point is that everyone's describing these people as British citizens, which they started off as being, but at what point do you lose your right to be a British citizen? Because if you're somebody who hates who we are as a country, the values that we have, the tolerance levels that we have, at what point do you just say, well, don't worry, you can hear everything about us, but hey, you're still welcome and we'll still regard you as a British citizen? Because to me, there must surely be a cut-off point. There must be.
But there is. The government is already using prerogative powers to strip dual nationals of their British citizenship if they've gone to join ISIS. So that I don't recognise this picture that we just open the floodgates, say, come back, don't worry, we won't send you to jail, you can just blow us up instead. That is not what is happening.
We don't have a mindset of dealing with terrorism. This guy, Hill, said he didn't want the new laws that Theresa May is about to bring in. He didn't want those to apply to people unless they had actually attempted or committed an atrocity. It's too late then. People are dead. You can't wait until they've committed the atrocity to send them to prison. You've got to do something beforehand.